Hello guys, welcome back to our anime moment. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of Renegade Immortal episode number 98 based on novel. So let's start. All of the cultivators in the Tien Dao sect were very excited. They all looked at Wang Lin with respect. The white-haired old man walked out from the crowd. He bowed toward Wang Lin and respectfully said, Junior Shen Feng Xiao of the Tien Dao sect greets ancestor. Greeting ancestor. The moment the old man finished speaking, all the other cultivators also greeted Wang Lin. This sound was very loud and spread very far. Wang Lin shook his head and said, I'm not your ancestor. The old man took a deep breath and respectfully said, You became the ancestor of all cultivators in Jiao when you reached the soul formation stage 200 years ago in the Tien Dao sect. I hope ancestor won't reject the title. Wang Lin let out a sigh and looked at the land of Jiao. This was where he grew up. Now that more than 500 years had passed, he still recalled the past. Sometimes it felt like the last 500 years were just a dream. Lord Ancestor, if you aren't in a rush, please stay at the Tien Dao sect for a few days so that the juniors can pay their respects. The old man's eyes were filled with fanaticism and respect. Wang Lin pondered a bit. At this moment, Wang Yue sighed and said, Wang Lin, stay in Jiao for a few days. Don't you want to see fourth uncle's descendants? The old man looked at Wang Yue with a startled expression. Wang Yue was one of the most talented disciples of the Tien Dao sect, so he naturally knew who he was, but what he had just said was a bit weird. The old man took a closer look and found that something was wrong. Although Wang Yue looked exactly the same, his eyes were no longer the eyes of Wang Yue of the Tien Dao sect, they now displayed the passage of time. Wang Yue smiled at the old man and sent him a message using voice transmission. The old man's body trembled after hearing it and he looked at Wang Lin with disbelief. He knew that this wasn't a lie, so he let out a bitter smile and respectfully said, Greetings, ancestor. Zheng Fengxiao, you were a disciple I personally brought to the Tien Dao sect. Back then you were still a young man, yet in a blink of an eye, so many years have passed. Wang Yue let out a sigh. Zheng Fengxiao bitterly nodded. He was still trying to comprehend what he had just heard. Wang Lin stayed at the Tien Dao sect. Aside from a few people from each sect, all of the remaining cultivators of Jiao returned to their own sects. In the Tien Dao sect, Wang Lin gave a lecture on Dao to all the core formation cultivators. This left a mark of Dao on them that drastically increased their chances of reaching the nascent soul stage. He did the same for the few nascent soul cultivators. He held nothing back as he told them about his experiences when reaching the soul formation stage. From that day on, they were no longer confused and had a clear path. 3 days later, Wang Lin and Wang Yue left the Tien Dao sect. Before Wang Lin left, he placed down a formation for the Tien Dao sect. It would keep out all soul formation cultivators, only soul transformation cultivators could break it. For a rank 3 cultivation country to have a formation like this was unprecedented. Normally, only a rank 5 cultivation country would have such a powerful sect protection formation. After doing this one last thing for Jiao, Wang Lin no longer had any more worries about the country that raised him. He then followed Wang Yue to silently look at the Wang family descendants. Then, in the ancestral home, Wang Lin saw Yue and her parents. Upon seeing Yue, it reminded Wang Lin of Da Niu and Zhu Yu when they were kids. He felt melancholy at this moment. Wang Yue took Yue as a disciple and passed down cultivation methods to her. Before Wang Lin left, he took away the Ji realm from the jade in the ancestral home and replaced it with his divine sense. Wang Yue didn't return to the Tien Dao sect but stayed with the Wang family in the capital. 200 years ago, he was placed into a pregnant woman in the Wang family. He had remained physically close to the Wang family in both his past and current lives, so his feelings for them were far stronger than Wang Lin's. He intended to dedicate his life to protect the Wang family descendants. The matter with the country of Jiao was finished. However, Wang Lin still had one lingering thought, the Heng Yue sect. This was the sect that set him onto the path of cultivation. Before he left Jiao, he decided to look for them. He spread out his divine sense and all the various mountains and caves appeared in his mind. With a simple movement, his body disappeared. From memory, Wang Lin's figure appeared outside a mountain called Elephant Snake Mountain. Wang Lin looked around with a complex expression. There was a formation here. He didn't break the formation but instead went through it and entered the mountain. Inside was a large cave. When Wang Lin entered the cave, he saw a lot of dust. No one had lived here for a very long time. There were 3 ancient words carved on a large piece of jade in the main hall. Heng Yue sect. Wang Lin let out a sigh as he wiped away the dust and silently stared at it for a very long time. Shortly after, Wang Lin spread out his divine sense and walked to the side. He broke the formation that was protecting a door and walked inside. In there were rows of shelves with jades on them that were releasing faint, ghostly lights. There was a corpse sitting in a lotus position in the corner. The bones were in pretty good condition, meaning that this person had clearly died due to old age. The corpse's right index finger was pointing at the ground. Wang Lin walked up, wiped away the dust on the ground, and saw the words that were carved there. The Heng Yue sect died with me. I have wronged the ancestors. I have wronged the ancestors. Wang Lin pondered. He took a step back, respectfully bowed, and said, Disciple Wang Lin greets senior. After letting out a sigh, Wang Lin picked up the jades one by one and scanned them with his divine sense. When he picked up one jade, he suddenly stopped. This old man's talent is lacking, so my cultivation won't reach a high level, but I have a strange comprehension of swords. It is as if my life is for the sword. However, I don't know why, but whenever my divine sense enters a sword, the sword shatters after one breath of time. There are no exceptions. The word useless is a good way to describe this old man. Since I can't use my divine sense to control swords, I can't use swords in battle. I'm a disgrace to my teacher. When I was 80, I had a dream that I was a sword spirit that swept the land. I was a king amongst swords. After I awakened, the sword from my dream remained engraved in my mind as if that was my life's pursuit, as if that was my past life. I gave up on trying to break past the foundation establishment stage and focused on swordsmithing. This idea was so powerful that it felt like I was possessed. I was completely fixated on this. I had to create this sword. After a decade, this old man was even willing to beg for materials to create swords. I have created several swords, but none of them were what I wanted, so I gave up on them. This year, the Heng Yue sect faced a great calamity because powerful enemies attacked us, so the sect was about to be destroyed. This old man was born in the Heng Yue sect and would naturally die in the Heng Yue sect. This old man opened up his furnace one last time to create a sword. I was short on time, so I gave up on precious materials and used mortal metals, then I created a large sword. After creating the sword, I suddenly felt a sign from the heavens, so I coated the sword in gold and soon it was shining. Looking at the sword, the feelings I experienced in my dream suddenly came back to me. At that moment, I was back in my dream and I was this sword spirit. That was the feeling I had been looking for. I named the sword Wealth. Although this name isn't anything fancy, it was what I was feeling. My soul seemed to be completely merged with this sword, so I charged out and resolved the calamity from my Heng Yue sect. Then, as I left a sword technique inside the sword. I hope future disciples will treat the sword kindly. Wang Lin put down the jade and closed his eyes. He was shaking on the inside. Although the main reason he came was to see what had happened to the Heng Yue sect, another reason was to find out more about Wealth. A sword spirit in his previous life. This sword is exactly the same as the celestial sword. Could this senior's soul have contained a fragment of the celestial sword spirit? Wang Lin opened his eyes. His eyes were sparkling. He pondered a bit before his body disappeared and left this place. When he reappeared, he was outside the Juming Valley. This was where his bag of holding was destroyed. Back then he had to go into the spatial rift to find the sword sheath. After creating a spatial rift, Wang Lin entered it. This time his only target was Wealth. That sword was created from ordinary metals, so I don't know if it could have survived inside the spatial rift for 500 years. Also, I don't know if the sword was destroyed along with the bag. Unfortunately, my cultivation level wasn't even high enough to notice the sword technique inside the sword, otherwise, Wang Lin let out a sigh as he spread out his divine sense. Half a month later, Wang Lin walked out from the spatial rift with a frown. He had found nothing. I'm afraid that the sword has already been destroyed. I must quickly return to the soul refining sect and find a lot of celestial jades to reach the soul transformation stage. With that, Wang Lin disappeared. When he reappeared, he was inside an ancient transfer array and then he disappeared from Jiao. In a rank for cultivation country on the western side of planet Suzaku. This country had already been taken over by the Forsaken Immortal clan and the cultivators of this country had become servants to the Forsaken Immortal clan. Someone wearing a straw hat was currently standing at the edge of the country. He was covered in a golden glow. Wang Lin, You finally came back. Senior already knows that you returned. I hope you don't disappoint him. This person slapped his bag of holding and a piece of jade appeared in his hand. You helped me kill Li Yuanfeng and sealed the country of Shui Yu. I, Ju Wutai, have no way to repay you besides giving you this jade. This jade contains Liu Mai's domain that I used my life to obtain. I hope you can fulfill Senior's hope and devour Liu Mai's Dao heart and then become the next Suzaku. He took one step and disappeared. In an ancient transfer array in the country of Pailu, a bright light flashed and Wang Lin walked out of it. He immediately flew into the air and charged toward the soul-refining sect. Along the way, Wang Lin spread out his divine sense and saw many cultivators with very ugly expressions that only seemed to hide their worries. Even when they met someone they knew, they would just quickly reply to each other and then head their own way. As Wang Lin flew, he suddenly frowned. More than 10 cultivators who had their divine senses linked in a mysterious way were sweeping the area. Among these 10 or so cultivators, 3 of them were at the soul formation stage and the rest were at the nascent soul stage. They weren't targeting anyone specifically but seemed to be checking every cultivator. When their skin came toward him, Wang Lin didn't have time to deal with them, so he took a step and dodged their divine senses. None of them noticed anything wrong, so they continued to sweep the area. Wang Lin's speed was very quick, so he arrived outside the soul refining sect shortly after. The sect protection formation was already activated. It formed a black cloud around the sect, and this cloud looked like it was filled with ghosts. Waves of screams would occasionally come from the cloud. This place looked very daunting, almost like it was the underworld. None of the cultivators of Pailu were willing to come near here, so they would always take a detour around this place. When Wang Lin saw the sect protection formation, he let out a sigh of relief. This meant that everything inside the sect was still safe. He activated the soul sealing technique and opened his mouth to spit out a strand of black gas that turned into the 30-foot-tall soul flag. Enter. Wang Lin pointed at the flag and it began to move. It quickly wrapped around Wang Lin and brought him through the formation. The moment the flag charged toward the black fog, the soul fragments made room to allow Wang Lin through. Then Wang Lin and the flag disappeared deep within the soul refining sect's formation. Soon after, the black cloud returned to normal. The passage that had opened up was quickly sealed. There weren't many changes since Wang Lin was last here, but there seemed to be even fewer disciples now, only 10% of them were present. Looking at the distance, of the 9 golden rings, only 3 remained. You have returned, an ancient voice came from the void. A blood ring suddenly appeared before Wang Lin and then Du Qian walked out of it. Du Qian looked even older than before and his entire body was giving off a thick death aura. The current him looked so different from the last time Wang Lin had seen him. Senior, you, Wang Lin's eyes became serious as he examined Du Qian. He let out a sigh as he saw that Du Qian's lifespan was almost at its end. You saw through it. It's no problem, I still have a few years of life left. I won't die too soon. Du Qian let out a laugh, and as he laughed, the death aura around him seemed to lessen. Not bad. In these short years, your cultivation level has increased a lot. You have already reached the point where you have to absorb celestial spiritual energy and refine your body. If you have a large amount of celestial jades, then it is only a matter of time before you reach the soul transformation stage. Du Qian took a closer look at Wang Lin. What he saw shocked him and made his eyes shine brightly. Wang Lin pondered a bit before asking, does Senior have any celestial jades? Du Qian looked toward the sky and laughed. What a guy you are, Heng Yue. You came back to the soul refining sect only for celestial jades. If you had enough celestial jades, I'm afraid you wouldn't even have returned. Wang Lin faintly smiled and shook his head. I would still return for the 1 billion soul flag. Du Qian's eyes lit up. He looked at Wang Lin with an appreciative gaze and smiled. Good, the 1 billion soul flag is yours. My soul fragment will also be yours in a few years. Heck, even the entire soul refining sect is yours. If you don't like this place, you can give up on the soul refining sect here, but you have to remember how good I was to you and you have to keep your promise. This old man only wants you to promise one thing, and that is to keep the 1 billion soul flag safe. As long as this soul flag is safe, then my soul refining sect still exists. This planet is too small to hold someone like you, Heng Yue. When you leave, you must find a place suitable for my soul refining sect to grow once more. You must also build 999 heaven-reaching towers to complete my soul refining sect's dream of becoming a rank 6 cultivation country. Listen well, Heng Yue. Wang Lin's eyes were calm. There was nothing free in this world, so if you wanted something, you would have to pay a price. After pondering for a bit, Wang Lin agreed with Du Qian's words. He nodded and said, I can do it. Du Qian carefully looked at Wang Lin before letting out a sigh. He looked into the sky and thought, Senior apprentice brother, I have gambled everything on your prediction. I hope I won't lose everything on this bet. He took a deep breath, waved his sleeves, and said, Follow me. With that, he led the way and Wang Lin followed closely behind. The two of them moved like lightning as they passed through the soul-refining sect and arrived at the back mountain. Du Qian sent out a seal, causing the surroundings to tremble and a black vortex to suddenly appear. The vortex had black lightning coursing through it, and then a dangerous aura quickly spread from inside it. This is the forbidden area of my soul-refining sect. Only those who have mastered the soul-sealing technique are allowed in here, so bringing you here doesn't break the sect's law. After Du Qian finished speaking, he disappeared into the vortex. Wang Lin pondered a bit. Although his expression remained calm, he put up his guard as he carefully followed Du Qian inside. The moment he entered the vortex, he felt like he was entering a transfer array. His vision blurred, and when he could see clearly again, he was inside a cave. This cave wasn't very large. On the wall before him were more than 30 tablets made of celestial jade. These are tablets for all of the past soul transformation cultivators of the soul-refining sect. Du Qian bowed to those tablets. Wang Lin also bowed. A hint of joy entered Du Qian's eyes and he faintly nodded. Then he walked to the side and pressed his hand on a wall. Shortly after, rumbling sounds came from all directions. Heng Yue, sit down in the lotus position. My soul-refining sect doesn't have many celestial jades left. Although we had a lot saved up when we came over from Planet 4 Saints, after tens of thousands of years and more than 30 soul transformation cultivators, our supply has long been used up. The remaining jades are what my senior apprentice brother and I got from the celestial realm when we were young. I'm afraid that they aren't enough for you. However, you don't have to worry, even if this isn't enough, I'll just bring you out to steal some. No matter what, you must reach the soul transformation stage soon. My soul-refining sect has never worried about not having enough celestial jades because when someone is ready to reach the soul transformation stage, we just pick a sect and bring the 1 billion soul flag to steal what we need. If one sect isn't enough, we will visit 2 sects, if 2 aren't enough, then we will go to a 3rd sect. Sooner or later, we will get enough celestial jades. When I reached the soul transformation stage, my teacher took the 1 billion soul flag and stole from all of the sects in 3 rank 5 cultivation countries. As Du Qian spoke, there was pride in his eyes. Wang Lin could only bitterly smile after hearing this. He thought that the soul-refining sect sure was tyrannical. The 1 billion soul flag was something even the Suzaku dreaded. With it, the soul-refining sect could sweep the planet and no one would dare to stop them. No wonder they were able to produce so many soul transformation cultivators. All of the celestial jades they used were stolen from others. At this moment, the rumbling got even louder and the ground began to crack. Then 2 blocks of celestial jade, each one the size of a person, came up from underground. Rich celestial spiritual energy began to fill the area. Wang Lin took a closer look and found that the quality of these 2 celestial jades wasn't as good as the quality of his jades. However, they were simply massive, so they naturally contained more celestial spiritual energy. Wang Lin took a deep breath and began to absorb the celestial spiritual energy. One piece of jade was in front of Wang Lin and the other was behind him. They both emitted rich celestial spiritual energy which he absorbed at an incredible pace. It was as if his body was a large vortex. The celestial spiritual energy coming from the celestial jades was so rich that it became a visible white line that connected the jades and Wang Lin. Du Qian, who was standing on the side, nodded. He slapped his bag of holding and took out 7 small, white flags. He threw them out and the 7 white flags landed around Wang Lin. Strands of white gas came out from the white flags, linking them together to form an irregular shape. Du Qian pointed at the air and said, "Stand." White lines came out from the lines connecting the white flags and completely surrounded Wang Lin. Heng Yue, with this formation, the speed at which you can absorb and convert your spiritual energy will increase. This old man has never held back on you. An endless amount of celestial spiritual energy entered his body and his body constantly refined it, causing the spiritual energy inside him to change. Wang Lin gradually forgot about the passage of time and completely immersed himself in absorbing celestial spiritual energy and converting his spiritual energy. Throughout this process, he gained a deep understanding of celestial spiritual energy. Reaching the soul transformation stage means a change in quality for cultivators. Only by converting spiritual energy and controlling celestial spiritual energy can one truly be considered a powerhouse. Soul transformation cultivators can control celestial spiritual energy, so many treasures that use spiritual energy become useless because they can't withstand celestial spiritual energy. Similarly, there are some treasures that can't be activated with spiritual energy at all, they can only be activated by celestial spiritual energy. The celestial sword and war god chariot were like this. With the passage of time, no matter how many celestial jades there were, they would eventually be absorbed. On this day, there were gentle crackling sounds as cracks appeared on the two jades. Cracks began to appear on the two slabs of celestial jade. The cracks began to spread and then the jade slowly turned grey. On this day, the last strand of celestial spiritual energy was extracted from the celestial jade in front of Wang Lin. With a bang, the slab of jade collapsed into small pieces, forming a small hill of dust before him. At the same time, the celestial jade behind him also collapsed. Wang Lin's hair flowed in the air without any wind. The amount of celestial spiritual energy in his body was now countless times higher than before. A powerful aura began to spread from his body, knocking away the 7 white flags because they couldn't withstand it. Wang Lin slowly raised his head. When he stood up, his eyes released a golden light before calming down. I've completed 1/3 of the process. Wang Lin's eyes landed on Du Tien, who was sitting in the corner. Du Tien opened his eyes and smiled. Good, now follow me while I take you to go steal some celestial jades. Although things are a mess due to the war, some war can't stop this tradition of my soul-refining sect. Du Tien laughed as he ripped open the space before him, creating a black vortex that he walked into. Wang Lin let out a faint smile as he followed him into the vortex. When they reappeared, they were already in the sky outside of the soul-refining sect. Du Tien had his hands behind his back as he flew forward riding on a cloud. As Wang Lin casually followed behind Du Tien, he felt how the celestial spiritual energy had changed his body. There wasn't much spiritual energy left in his body at the moment, a majority of it had been converted to celestial spiritual energy. However, he had to fill his body to the brim with celestial spiritual energy, so he still needed a large amount of celestial jades to reach the soul transformation stage. There was a swarm on the western side of Pailu. This was a land of death where you couldn't see a living person within a radius of 10,000 kilometers. This place was a haven for insects. There were a lot of poisonous insects living here that even some cultivators wouldn't dare to mess with. Here one could often see large swarms of insects moving around. They were the kings here. There were other types of beasts inside the swarm that were also poisonous. However, they couldn't match the insects, so they spent most of their time inside the swarm and would normally not come out. All of the cultivators in Pailu knew not to take a step into the swarm. It was not forbidden because it was dangerous, but because this land was the home of the demonic insect sect. The demonic insect sect was located in a swamp. The demonic insect sect was a very strange sect. Instead of having a main sect hall, its buildings and structures were scattered across the swamp. There were a few spots that were solid ground. It was in these spots that the disciples of the demonic insect sect lived. They lived in these scattered areas that were spread across the entire swamp. The disciples of the demonic insect sect didn't have much sense of camaraderie with each other. Their cultivation method was related to insects, so the large amount of poisonous insects in the swamp did make it more convenient for them. On this day, 2 figures appeared in the sky above the edge of the swamp. One of the 2 was old and the other was young. The old man was wearing a black robe, his hair was grey, and he was very skinny. He had his hands behind his back, his eyes were cold, and he exuded an aura that caused all of the insects to run away in terror. The person beside him was a young man. He was wearing white and had his hair casually flowing behind him. Although he wasn't handsome, he had this abnormal aura to him. His eyes were especially clear, one look from them could shake a person's heart. These 2 were Du Tien and Wang Lin. It was clear that Du Tien was very familiar with this place, because he led Wang Lin directly here. He looked at the swamp below him and sighed. Zheng Niu, even though they are all hiding like rats, don't look down on the demonic insect sect members. Let me tell you that these people must all have been filthy rich in their previous lives. When my teacher brought me here, the amount of celestial jades we stole was more than 3 times what we took from the other sects. With that, he reached out to the void and the 1 billion soul flag appeared in his hand. After grabbing the 1 billion soul flag, Du Tien's aura changed completely. He stared at the swamp below him and waved the flag. Countless soul fragments immediately flew out and covered the area. The sky changed colors and time seemed to have stopped. The entire area was surrounded by soul fragments which constantly let out ghostly wails. The sound waves of these wails spread across the entire swamp. They were no weaker than attacks from magic treasures. More than 10 golden purple soul fragments charged out with excitement in their eyes and rushed forward without any commands. All of the poisonous insects ran as if they had met their natural enemy. Du Tien's eyes lit up and he shouted, "Mice of the demonic insect sect, your grandfather Du Tien has come. The rule is the same as usual, quickly hand over the celestial jades." After Wang Lin heard this, he couldn't help but laugh out loud. Could there even have been some rule set for stealing celestial jades? Wang Lin didn't know that the soul refining sect was used to being this bossy. Back when Du Tien's master brought him here, his master said the same thing, and it was rumored that his master's master also said something similar. In short, there was indeed a rule to this. A few angry roars came from the swarm before two people flew out. The soul fragments tried to stop them, but they were all knocked back by their auras. However, the two of them knew what to do. They merely pushed the soul fragments back without injuring them. One was an old man who was wearing a purple robe and had two blood-red scorpions around him. He quickly shouted, "Old Ghost Du Tien, there are no more celestial jades." The other person was an old woman wearing a palace dress. Although her face was filled with wrinkles, her eyes were bright. She coughed to cut off the purple-robed old man, then she looked at Du Tien and said, "Old Ghost Du Tien, we can't give you any celestial jades. When the Forsaken Immortal clan attacked, I was seriously injured and required a lot of celestial jades to finally recover. Considering the future, we can't give you any." Du Tien's eyes became serious and then his gaze landed on the old woman. He pointed at his forehead and the death aura he had been suppressing was released. He said, with a hoarse voice, "Yang Hong, I have less than 2 years left to live." The old woman trembled and her expression changed slightly. The purple-robed old man's expression became ugly and he muttered, "You people of the soul-refining sect are all crazy. When your lifespan is almost up, you take the 1 billion soul flag and steal celestial jades from people." Du Tien laughed and said, "That is correct. I only have less than 2 years left to live, so I naturally don't fear death. Give me celestial jades and I'll leave. If you don't give me any, I won't fight with you, but I'll wipe out all the poisonous insects in this swamp." The purple-robed old man laughed in anger and was about to speak when the old woman coughed and said, "Old Ghost, why be like this? Not only can the two of us can wipe out your soul-refining sect, this junior beside you will die for sure." Wang Lin let out a faint smile as his right hand pointed to the air and a celestial sword flew out with a swing. Wang Lin used a strand of celestial spiritual energy in that swing. Although he hadn't reached the soul transformation stage, he could still use a bit of celestial spiritual energy. The celestial sword naturally needed celestial spiritual energy to be used. Once celestial spiritual energy was used, it released a blinding, golden light and exuded celestial pressure. The sword energy descended like lightning. The old woman's expression greatly changed as she reached for her bag of holding and took out a turtle shell to block the sword energy. Boom! A loud bang could be heard as the turtle shell turned to dust when it stopped the sword energy. The old woman's expression was very ugly. Even the purple-robed old man's expression was ugly as he stared at Wang Lin. Wang Lin slowly asked, "Do you two still think I'll die for sure today?" The old woman said, with a serious tone, "Who are you?" That sword energy just now contained celestial spiritual energy, but she wasn't surprised about that. She had already noticed that Wang Lin was at the step between the soul formation and soul transformation stages. She didn't consider this kind of cultivator a threat, but she could have never imagined that he would have a celestial treasure. No matter what quality, as long as a treasure uses spiritual energy, it's called a spirit treasure. At the same time, treasures that use celestial spiritual energy are called celestial treasures. The so-called celestial treasures are treasures that can withstand the power of celestial spiritual energy and perfectly display its power. This kind of treasure is very rare. The only thing most soul transformation cultivators want other than reaching the ascendant stage is to find a celestial treasure for themselves. Among soul transformation cultivators, having a celestial treasure and not having one is a huge difference. With a celestial treasure, one can use celestial spiritual energy to its full potential, but if one doesn't have one, they have to use it with their techniques, which are always weaker than treasures. In addition, there are some treasures that lie somewhere in between spirit and celestial treasures. They can be activated with both types of energy, and although they can't fully utilize the power of celestial spiritual energy, they are much more powerful than treasures that use spiritual energy. These types of treasures are called pseudo-celestial treasures. The 1 billion soul flag and restriction flag are considered pseudo-celestial treasures. This video will end here.